first like to take a liberty, and Claire Lewis, this choir has been the sound of God. It really has. Let's give him a hand. I'm Judge Ken Adams. I was out across the street. Some of you, I'm sure, have been to see me a few times. And I hope it's always been a very pleasant experience. My chore or assignment was to try and relate, not necessarily the same old thing over and over again, but I always like to come from the child's side. And from the standpoint of looking at this, one of the most greatest articles I've seen in a long time regarding this particular subject, and children who were unborn on 9/11, provided by Clara to me, is called The Children of 9/11. You may have seen it. I'm only going to take one child out of that particular review and discuss this with you very briefly. This was an interview with Gabby is his name, Jacobs Dick, who is 9 years old now, and the son of Ariel Jacobs, a 29-year-old sales executive who died in Tower 1. This particular interview was especially sensitive to me, inasmuch as I've been blessed with 12 grandchildren, and many of them are all peppered through this particular time. Every year on 9/11, we send balloons up to my dad, our area, with notes. We write about things we want to talk to him about, or I give him an update on how my life is going. Mostly it's, I miss you, our life's going great, or I just won a championship in baseball. I'm a catcher, and I'm a third baseman, and I've got a really good arm. My new dad officially adopted me when I was in the second grade, but he was already my dad who lived with me, just my last name changed. Instead of feeling like I have two dads, I feel like I'm two Gabbies. When my dad is on a business trip and isn't here, I feel like I'm the first Gabby, who lives with his mom and is the only child. When my dad is here, I feel like the second Gabby, who has two brothers, an older stepsister, and how do I say this, an adopted dad. Maddie, my older stepsister, is easy to talk to. We grew up together and have much in common. With my younger brothers, nothing traumatizes, they were never traumatized as I was. So they're a little different than me. 10 years since my first dad died on September 11th, I don't exactly know how to deal with it because I never really knew him. Last year, my birthday party was on September 11th, and we still sent balloons up. We can't forget to do that. So was Gabby's interview. If any of you were here on our first service on 9/11, I recited or mentioned, with the liberty of a personal thing, and that is one of my three sons, and also a daughter, was in New York City, in a building right beside Tower 1. And he has sent me a review of this, and I asked him for this 10 years ago. He said, "Dad, I can't do it." And I said, "Well, in time, I would like to hear from you." So I called him 10 years afterwards, and he lives in San Antonio. And I said, "Lee, I think really some people would like to be interested in your experience there." So I'm going to run through this with your liberty. It is something that has taken 10 years to write. It's very well done, even though he's my son. On Tuesday, September 11, 2001, I was a consultant working in New York City. He was 30 years old, in the on a consulting project. During those 4 months, I had lived in the Marriott Hotel, sandwiched between the two towers. My daily routine was basically waking up in the hotel, walking through the lobby of Tower 1, making the escalators in Pedway over West Street to building 3 World Financial Center, and back again at the end of a long day. This particular week, the Marriott was full, and I had to stay at a hotel in Midtown. As a consultant, I was a connoisseur of fine room service. I remember being disappointed because the Marriott room service had the best cheeseburger I've ever had. As it turned out, not being in the Marriott to enjoy my cheeseburger dinner on Monday was one of the several circumstances that allowed me to be here today. Another was the fact that I had a conference call that Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Otherwise, I may have still been asleep in my room in the Marriott, as I had worked until midnight the day before. On the morning of September 11th, after taking the subway to the station nearest the World Trade Center, I walked outside across the World Trade Center Plaza and along the sidewalk of the north side of the North Tower. I walked this path about 8:35 a.m., minutes before the first plane struck the north side. Once inside my building and in the conference room our project was set up to be in, I called one of the conferencee's participants in London to confirm his availability for the 9 o'clock call. This was around 8:50, and I was unaware that the first plane had already hit Tower 1. The gentleman from London, and his heavy British accent, kept repeating something about a missile hitting the World Trade Center. His tone was very inquisitive, not urgent, and having just walked there, I thought he may have had a few too many pints at lunch. I just told him to be ready at 9 and hung up the phone. At this point, the building's intercom was making noise of nothing intelligible. It didn't sound like it had been used in years, certainly not in the last 4 months I have been working there. This, along with the strange call moments ago, triggered my curiosity, so I decided to walk to the windows from our interior conference room to find out what was going on. On my way, I saw many individuals with panicked expressions. When I got to the window, I saw smoke billowing from windows and loose paper and glass raining down from the tower across the street. A gash was very evident on the north side of the tower, and I could see debris and a body on the sidewalk, walk I had crossed less than 10 minutes before. At that moment, I thought this is a tragic accident involving one of many helicopters or small planes that fly along the Hudson River. While standing there trying to grasp the situation, the building intercom finally came to life and said, "An aircraft has hit tower number 1, get out of the building." I returned to the conference room, not alarmed, but concerned about what I had just seen and how the rest of the day would unfold. Knowing this accident would already be on the news, I decided to call my wife Jennifer in Houston to let her know what was going on and that I was okay. She was already at work seeing the coverage on television. No more than 30 seconds into the call, she starts screaming, "A plane just hit the tower." Oh my God, a plane just crashed into the building. My response was, "Darling, I was just calling to let you know I'm fine." Her response, "Lee, another plane has just crashed into the other tower." I ran back to the window and saw the south tower adding to the smoke, glass, and paper from the first. In that moment, I knew we were under attack. The building intercom chimed in, "Get out of the building now." collapsed and gutted the lower floors of our building that we had gone from the 46th floor down. We were directed around to the back of the World Trade Financial Center, toward the river and the yacht harbor by building security. For whatever reason, we were not allowed to head north of Manhattan Island away from the scene. The base of the building was filled with emergency personnel, treating hordes of people bleeding from falling glass and debris. In the middle of the hundreds of others pinned by water on two sides, the direction from which we came, and security on the other, the burning World Trade Center on the other, we had nowhere to go. The Jersey City ferry was our only means of escape. Although they were loading and speeding people across as fast as possible, it was going to take hours. All we could do was look straight up at the apocalyptic scene before us. The people around us were in one of three states: silent shock, hysterical shock, or seemingly oblivious to anything going on around them. Then the most unimaginable thing started to happen. Bodies started falling from the sky. People in both buildings above the impact points were hanging out of the blown-out windows, billowing with black smoke or air. At first, I thought they were falling accidentally or getting pushed by desperate souls behind them. They never seemed to come out of the same window, though. Then I saw a falling couple holding hands and realized these people were deliberately jumping to their death to avoid burning to death. I started counting and stopped at 60, close enough to see the colors of the neckties on the men. My colleague was approaching hysteria, and I was close behind her. I noticed the ferry was waiting for the people around us, and they were immobilized by the scene before it. They were immobilized by the scene before us. I grabbed Gloria's hand and made my way to the ferry. We quickly made it across Hudson River, and as we walked across the gangway to the shore, the rumble of the South Tower collapsing started. In disbelief, I watched the building disintegrate into a cloud of debris that reached halfway across the river towards enveloping the area I stood minutes before. I thought of the hundreds of firefighters, police, and medics in the streets at the base of the building, and the tens of thousands of people that surely must have been in the buildings. Shortly thereafter, the second tower went down, and as I stood there, many around me were saying that multiple cities were being attacked. And of course, that was Washington, D.C., Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York. At that moment, I was waiting for a mushroom cloud to envelop us. In the days afterwards, driving from New York to Houston, I went through many emotional states: incomprehension at the loss of life, guilt that I was alive when so many were lost, heartbreak. When the cellular networks unclogged, and I could listen to messages from friends and family, left just after the collapse of buildings. The most gut-wrenching were from my wife and father. Hearing the messages from these two made me sure I was still alive and had me crying for hours. Relief from the embracing hugs of my family in Memphis as I passed through. Love and joy when I was able to finally hold my wife in my arms. Anger, I was expertly delineated, really expertly delineated as the people who did this. The last 10 years, the first couple of years after 9/11, the events and visions of what happened were always present in my mind. It was slowly receding, but still entered my conscious thinking regularly. I've had many lessons in my life these last 10 years that have pushed out the ugliness of that day. Most important of those lessons are my two sets of twins. After the experience of 9/11, I honestly wasn't sure having children was a wise thing to do. How would I protect them from this? What would their future